Before we get any further, today's video contains spoilers for episode 4 of The Bad Batch Season 3. If you haven't had the chance to watch it yet, we highly recommend heading on over to Disney Plus and doing so before starting the video. But if you're all caught up or just don't care, let's dive right in.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
This week's episode focuses on Omega and Crosshair's escape and eventual reunion with Clone Force 99, and as an episode overall, we can't really fault it too much. It focuses heavily on some tropes we're all too familiar with, like the corruption festering in the Imperial ranks. And don't get us wrong, the episode does a great job of showing the effects of corruption on the military and the locals without being too heavy-handed about it. But if you've been with us for some time, you'll know we've pretty much beaten that topic to death. So instead, we'll do what any good fan does once in a while and hyper-focus on one insignificant detail that really plucked our nose hairs: the survival rate of ship crashes. Now, we're almost certain our eagle-eyed, incredibly intelligent fans have already noticed this recurring problem in Star Wars media, and this latest Bad Batch episode was just the most recent example. Early on in the episode, Omega and Crosshair are piloting a stolen Imperial shuttle through hyperspace, then try to make Planet 4 on a world we're later told is known as Lao. The shuttle they're trying to wrest control over has sustained heavy damage in the rear engines, and as they come in for a landing, they're unable to stabilize it and end up crash landing nose first into what looks like a giant boulder. Yet, despite the insane speed ships move at, the lack of a controlled descent, and a head-on collision into terra firma, both Omega and Crosshair unbuckle their seatbelts and hop out of the cockpit like it was no big deal. This isn't an isolated incident either, as we mentioned before. In the first episode of this season, an identical Imperial shuttle crash lands in the wilderness area of Tantis, and the troops there seem to have survived the crash well enough to die to the wild fauna. If anything, that example is an even worse offender. Omega and Crosshair at least had the decency to look worried while trying to prevent the crash. The stormtroopers aboard that falling shuttle stood calmly and waited for the potential embrace of death like it meant nothing. And before someone blames that on the Imperial's superior training, they scream at plenty of stuff to rule that out. But it wasn't always this way. There have been just as many scenes in past Star Wars media that showed crashes as the devastating death trap they're meant to be. The best example that comes to mind is the second Battle of Geonosis. As we're sure you all remember, when those transports went down, there were some clone trooper survivors, but several died and many more were injured. As a second example, when Sergeant Banks led the mission to Osnek and their transports were attacked, most of his clone squad were either killed on impact or left so injured they could barely participate in the mission. So what's changed, we hear you ask? Why is Star Wars going soft on us suddenly? Well, it turns out they're probably not. At this point, we should go over the basics of why plane crashes are typically so deadly. As the saying goes, it's not the falling that kills you, but hitting the ground, and the same goes for when you're inside a fast-moving metal contraption like a plane, spaceship, or car. When coming in for a normal landing, airplanes, like we have in our universe, reduce their speed somewhat, control the angle of their descent, and deploy their wheels to make as smooth of a touchdown as they can while they decelerate. For spaceships with frontal and rear thrusters, landing is typically easier, as ships can hover mid-air with the use of their directional thrusters, then cut the power gradually until they make a vertical landing. Traditional landings are still possible, but the use of thrusters makes landing significantly easier and safer. When we're talking about a crash landing, however, things are different. If a ship crashes, we have to assume they've lost the ability to control their descent. Perhaps the thrusters are out of commission or the engines have taken too much damage to engage properly, thus leaving the ship with no power to decelerate. In Omega and Crosshair's situation today, this seems to have been the issue, resulting in them plummeting toward the ground under their own incoming speed and the helping hand of gravity. Traveling toward the ground at such high speeds already puts a heavy strain on the body. G-forces are strong enough to strain neck muscles and generally make your body ache, but it's not going to be enough to kill you. That's what the impact is for. And there are two ways the impact can kill you, and both are pretty simple. Either the ship you're in smashes into pieces and takes you with it as sheets of super sharp metal, glass, beams, and so on make their acquaintance with your physical form, or the sudden change from max speed to no speed smushes you like a gnat on a windshield. To give you an idea, most humans can survive 4 to 6 G acting on their bodies. Astronauts leaving the atmosphere undergo 3 G, and the average plane crash is 150 to 200 G. Usually, it's a combination of both, and they're so effectively deadly that most crashes are perceived as an instant death. Think of all the plane crashes and how absurdly rare it is for anyone to survive. Anytime someone lives, it's always touted as a miracle. By that logic, given that ships in Star Wars move much faster, crashes should be an insta-kill, and Disney is just being ridiculous in letting them walk these accidents off, right? Well, not exactly. It's easy to hate on Disney for many things, but in this case, there's quite a lot of established Star Wars lore that explains why many of these crashes aren't as deadly as we'd expect them to be. Let's get back to physics for a moment. We've mentioned already that the G-forces from suddenly decelerating from a very high speed to a low speed are deadly. The same goes for accelerating too quickly. Objects tend to like staying in the condition they're in, and that's called inertia. Any sudden changes one way or the other are jarring, and the more extreme the change, the more extreme the forces acting on the object are. As you can imagine, this basic rule of physics would mean anyone entering or exiting hyperspace would just die immediately. Accelerating to such an insane speed or decelerating from it would result in such immense forces acting on the passengers that they'd never survive. And this is where superior Star Wars technology comes in. To keep their passengers from becoming intergalactic gloop, spaceships are equipped with something called an inertial compensator, which is a bit of a misnomer because what it actually is an inertial nullifier. What these do is essentially nullify the effects of inertia. Therefore, there are no forces acting on the passengers when jumping to or from light speed. By extension, ships equipped with hyperdrives, such as the Imperial shuttles from this season, also have inertial nullifiers, which would continue to protect the passengers from other extreme decelerations, going from free fall to fall. If we take that out of the equation, the only thing left that could kill the passengers is the ship breaking into pieces and stabbing their squishy organic forms with shrapnel. However, in every instance of a crash that we've seen, the pilots have done a good job of keeping the ship's nose up and landing with the underside of the ship hitting, then dragging across the ground. Certainly, this damages the ship quite badly, but when the cockpit is located near the top of the ship, it means the damage is less likely to spread up toward them. So why doesn't this apply to the other, more lethal crashes we mentioned? Well, those shuttles didn't have inertial compensators. In both the Second Battle of Geonosis and the mission to Osnek, the shuttles the clones had been aboard were LAATs, or Low Altitude Assault Transports. As the low altitude part of their name implies, these transports aren't meant to withstand hyperspace transit. They're there to transport personnel from orbit planetside or from ships within the atmosphere to the ground. Without the inertial compensators, anyone aboard it is at the mercy of gravity and inertia if they're sent plummeting toward the ground, which explains the significantly higher casualty rate. So, in the end, it makes sense why passengers aboard a hyperspace-capable vessel don't immediately jump to panic when their ship's headed for a crash. Yeah, they can still be dangerous, but statistically, there's reasonable expectations in-universe that the passengers will survive to deal with the inconvenience of having a downed vessel. Sometimes, there are continuity issues that are swept under the rug for the sake of coolness or the plot. Other times, it's just the natural consequences of in-universe established rules. Well, thanks for coming to our TED Talk. We hope you learned something new about physics, both in our universe and the Star Wars one. Did you like this episode? What do you think is going to happen next? Feel free to share your thoughts and guesses in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.